Hey everybody, welcome into the back room. I'm Andy Ostroy. We have author Bill Adair with us today. We shall chat with Bill in just a second. But first, thank you for tuning in. We appreciate you listening, and we'd love to hear your comments. So email us at backroomandy@gmail.com and or post on our social media, and we'll read some feedback next time. And if you like the podcast, please follow or subscribe and rate and review, and to be notified every time we post a new episode. So let me tell you a little bit about Bill Adair. He is the founder of the Pulitzer Prize-winning website PolitiFact and is the Knight Professor of the Practice of Journalism and Public Policy at Duke University and the director of the Duke Reporters Lab. His awards include the Pulitzer Prize for National Reporting with the PolitiFact staff and Manship Prize for New Media in Democratic Discourse and the Everett Dirksen Award for Distinguished Coverage of Congress. His new book is Beyond the Big Lie, The Epidemic of Political Lying, Why Republicans Do It More, and How It Could Burn Down Our Democracy. Bill, welcome into the back room.
Thank you for having me.
So, congratulations, your new book, Beyond the Big Lie, The Epidemic of Political Lying, Why Republicans Do It More, and How It Could Burn Down Our Democracy. So, tell us about this book, and why it was important to get this book out now before the November election.
Well, the book broadly looks at the question of how politicians lie and why. And this is something that, as a political journalist, surprised me when I started to reflect on it. Reporters just don't ask politicians about lying. They don't ask, hey, why do you lie? Or they don't ask, why do politicians lie? And so this is sort of the elephant in the room of American politics. And I think it's really important to explore because it affects our politics in such profound ways because it makes it so hard for us to have an adult conversation on important issues, particularly on issues where there's denial of facts, like climate, like immigration. And so if we want to try to have a serious discussion about policy, how we might address those problems, we can't because there's little agreement on facts. And so what I did, I'm the founder of PolitiFact, the fact-checking website. And so after I came here to Duke University, where I'm a professor, I said, I need to reflect on my time as editor of PolitiFact. And so I started just talking to politicians and political operatives and asking them the simple question, why do you lie?
And what did you find out? They probably lied about the answer.
Yeah. Well, a lot of them answer that question by saying, well, I never lie.
Of course.
And so, it turns out I selected a bunch of angels and they don't lie. But they all had interesting perspectives on lying. And a few were courageous enough to tell me stories about their own lying. So first, why do they lie? So the biggest reason is ambition. They lie to personally get ahead. They lie because they think it's going to help them with their base. And helping them with their base is probably the single biggest thing. And so I came to see it as a calculation, almost like points, that they would think about what they're about to say, whether they would say it in a podcast or in something they said on the floor of the House or Senate or in a tweet or wherever, and they would think, okay, if I lie, am I going to gain more from saying this than I'm going to lose? So, and in my sort of point system, I thought of it as points. So of course, the point system has changed, and this gets to sort of the other reason for why they lie, that it's easier than ever to get away with lies because they, in gerrymandered districts these days, House members, both at the federal level and the state level, often don't have districts where they're held accountable for what they say. They've got adoring voters who say, hey, you're great. And they often don't have serious election competition. And so they can really say what they want. And with a depleted local news media, with all of the turmoil in local news, it's not like the local news is saying, hey, why did you lie about that? So they can get away with that. And then sort of part of that reason is also partisan media. The partisan media, particularly on the right, not only looks the other way when they lie, but often cheers them on and repeats the lies.
Mm-hmm.
And as we saw with the Dominion lawsuit against Fox, that Fox found that if it didn't go along with the lies about the 2020 election, it lost viewers. So it was actually in their economic interest to echo the lies. So those are the main reasons. Occasionally there are other reasons, like they'll lie for self-defense. When they get tangled up in a scandal, they'll lie about it. One of my favorite things, I was talking to one politician who was facing a crisis in his campaign where it had been discovered that he had had an affair on his wife. And so one of the possible responses was just deny it all. Not to say anything in the story specifically was wrong, because the story was right, but just sort of a broad denial, like that story's wrong. And sort of with the idea there was some little thing that was wrong, but that would issue a blanket denial, and that would be the lie. He didn't do that. And so that's another reason that politicians lie.
Well, that's a really interesting thing, because you're bringing up a whole other category of lying, which is the post-scandal lying, which is a whole genre unto itself. But one remembers back, like Anthony Weiner, who spent that week or whatever it was claiming that my laptop was hacked.
I was hacked.
Yes,
exactly.
And so I definitely want to go back to the general lying, but that has always fascinated me when politicians are caught with their pants down or hand in the cookie jar or whatever, pick your poison, and somehow they think the laptop was hacked is going to bail them out. And I'm watching this. I got to watch it in real time going, dude, just throw in the towel, because 4 days from now, you're not only going to be resigning, but you're going to be saying that was a whole bullshit story or whatever. Like, why lie when we all know the truth? Why do they lie in those situations? Are they just delusional or hubris?
So one Democratic operative answered that question by saying, when you've got nothing else in that kind situation, lie.
So it's literally just to throw enough shit up on the wall and hopefully something sticks.
Yeah, maybe. And it's just desperation.
Yeah, we see it right now with New York City Mayor Eric Adams. He's taking a page out of Trump's playbook. It was rigged. We knew they'd be coming after me. I was fighting for you, and I'm targeted. Like, literally the same shit.
Sure.
It's like a postponing of the inevitable. And again, is it hubris? Is it just like, I'm so much smarter than these people, I'm going to get away with this?
No, I think it's desperation. Here in North Carolina, CNN had a tremendous report that documented so thoroughly, proving that Mark Robinson had done some extraordinary, distasteful things on various websites. And he denied them all and gave the impression that he had been hacked. I'm not sure he has actually used the word hacked, but same kind of thing. And but I think it's the last resort.
So politicians used to spin. They'd stretch the truth. Once in a while, they'd throw in an occasional outright lie. Today, the lying is like a science. It's, in particular, it's the point of your book, it comes from the right, but it resembles the kind of gaslighting and propaganda we've come to know from fascist dictatorships. Are you worried about America's right-wing extremist politicians pushing us toward fascism, especially when they enable and protect a dictator wannabe like Trump? Isn't this like next-level lying kind of a precursor to those kinds of authoritarian governments?
I think I'll let others speak to the historical context on things like that. That's not my specialty. I do get concerned, though, by the volume of lies and the way that Trump's lies are echoed. One of my colleagues raised a great point about Trump and said how fact checkers will take him at his word when he says things like, I'm going to let the states make up their own minds about abortion policy. And my colleague says, how can you trust anything this man says? This is a man who has had thousands and thousands of documented lies, and he has no credibility. And I think that's very legitimate. And so when he makes these various campaign promises. Lately, he's been promising tax breaks for all these many individual constituencies. How can you believe that any of that could actually happen?
Mm-hmm.
Likewise, what's even more troubling is the way that so many other Republicans have echoed his lies.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, we saw this most notably on the lies about the 2020 election, where they just joined in and they just repeated these things over and over again. And that to me is really worrisome, because there was already an imbalance in the two parties. And I should be clear, and the subtitle is Why Republicans Lie More,
Mm-hmm.
which I explore at some length in the book. But Democrats are not choir boys here.
Mm-hmm.
They lie plenty, and my solutions in the end of the book have to do with both parties. This is a problem for our system that we need to address. But there is so much more lying from the right that it has created this tremendous imbalance in our system that messes up a lot of things, including journalism,
Mm-hmm.
because the political journalists try to treat the Republican Party with the same fairness
Mm-hmm.
that journalists have for decades. And it just doesn't work, because this is a party that denies reality on climate, that makes things up all the time about immigration. And journalists have had to struggle to try to figure out how to handle this, given their past practice of evenness.
You're mentioning something which is a whole other subject, which is the double standard that exists in the media, the whataboutism, the normalization. That to me is the biggest problem we have, is that you can watch the cable news folks and Trump will say something that's completely outrageous, and then they'll go back to the panel and be like, why would he say that? Why would he say that? Because he's a pathological liar. Like, I partly blame them for the creation and enabling and empowerment of Donald Trump, because we're at a point where we've never seen someone lie so much. We've never had a sociopath be a nominee for president. They have to keep the conversation going. And in order to keep the conversation going, I think to your point, they have to normalize it. So it's like a legit conversation. But isn't that just so dangerous? Isn't that partly why we're in a dead heat right now, 3 weeks from the election?
It's stunning. I mean, it really is. I look at the polls and I am just amazed that more people aren't bothered by that they will often say, yeah, I know he lies a lot, but I like it because he's going to blow things up. But I really think that's a function of a news ecosystem where people are just not seeing the same realities. I have my students, for the first assignment in this class I teach, watch conservative media and compare it to the mainstream media, and it's sort of a different worlds assignment. And they're all shocked by it, and they all come away really surprised at how stark the difference is between partisan media and the mainstream media. Now, it's not just on the right. The assignment also allows them to look at left-leaning media, but left-leaning media still is fact-based. It's just selective in how it presents the facts sometimes, whereas the right media, I have them watch Fox and Friends, presents propaganda. And so it's just sad, because it deprives a whole bunch of the country from really understanding the facts about what's going on, because they don't even hear about it.
Well, if young people do watch Fox and Friends or other evening programs on Fox, they will see the hosts calling Kamala Harris the equivalent of Satan, and it's going to destroy the country. You watch MSNBC and to the same degree CNN, you'll see the hosts bending over backwards to normalize Trump, to give him every fair shot in the world to sound and be presented as legit. And that's the stark contrast to me, is that those two things couldn't be further from each other on the spectrum of balance and fairness in the media. And they're both equally destructive to me. To lie about Kamala Harris is very dangerous. And to pretend that Donald Trump isn't a pathologically lying sociopath is also equally dangerous to me. Because where we are today.
I think what you're getting at is the media is still struggling, that the sort of the DNA of the American media is evenness, is fairness.
Yes.
And it hasn't figured out with someone who lies at the tremendous volume that Trump does, whose speeches, wander aimlessly from thing to thing to thing, whose speeches are filled with these completely unrealistic proposals. The media hasn't figured out, like, how do you report that?
Right. But even more so, what we are learning now in 2024 is from the founding fathers to the media to the judicial system, and therefore down to the electorate, nobody ever prepared for a Donald Trump, which is really what you're saying.
Right.
And how to deal with him.
Yeah, except that he in many ways was created by our entertainment system, our entertainment industry.
Has he changed the rules? Baffled. Like, are we at a new norm now? Like, you watch the VP debate, and so many people were like, it was really a breath of fresh air to watch two grown-ups, two adults talk to each other civilly. So now we're at the point of lying about everything is okay as long as you got that, like, Midwestern nice thing going on. You know what? It's not even lying if you're nice, right?
What was interesting about J.D. Vance in that debate showed just how smooth he could be. There was one answer I particularly admired, and that was a question about school shootings. And one thing that Trump and Vance are eager to do is basically to blame every problem they can on immigration. And so this story about school shootings, there's no connection with immigration. So what he did, though, was create this sort of fact sandwich that was like, well, I'm as troubled by school shootings as everyone is. I've got children, and it's very, very worrisome. And then you've got illegal guns coming over the border, and then you've got these school shootings. And it was just so sly what he did there. Not directly saying it, but the linkage was clear. It was just a clear implication in what he was saying. And so, anyway.
But when he says Donald Trump participated in a peaceful transition of power and Donald Trump saved Obamacare, like, we're in a new norm. This is it. Like, smile and you will get props for being a nice guy, no matter what kind of bullshit comes out of your face.
So this is why fact-checking is so important. And this is why one of the things I call for in the book is we just have to have more journalists who are questioning and telling people, when politicians say something, whether it's accurate or not.
At debates? Are you saying at debates also, or just in general?
I think all the time. A lot of news organizations put a lot of resources into debates, which is good, but we need to be fact-checking every word that comes out of every politician's mouth. So, and let's remember, we shouldn't just be concerned about the candidates for vice president. We should also be scrutinizing our U.S. House members and the people running for U.S. House, and our state legislators and the people running for state legislature. And one of the really troubling things is that when you look at fact-checking around the United States, there's not a lot of fact-checking at the state level. We did a report here at Duke where we looked at how much fact-checking is going on in various states, and we found huge swaths where there's just no fact-checking. So governors and members of the House, members of the Senate, often are never fact-checked. So it's like driving on the Autobahn. They are never going to get a ticket. So I really think we shouldn't just focus on these big names running for president.
It is so important. I recently had Dana Bash on, and we were talking about the debates. And I know that, journalists and moderators are in a tough spot because, especially with someone like Trump, you end up having to correct him every single time he says something, and then that's just not a debate. That's just a circus. On the other hand, if you know going in that you're moderating a debate and one of the candidates is a pathological liar and is literally going to lie every time he opens his mouth, by deciding not to fact check, you are literally giving the game to him. So what would then be the point of having a debate if you're literally saying, go ahead, stand by the podium, you have free reign to lie nonstop, and we're not going to do anything about it? I think we should just not have debates anymore, because what does the voter at home get from them if that's the way they are?
So my students had a great idea to deal with that. And that is, one, fact check them live, but reduce their time when they're caught lying. So dynamically, as the debate goes on, if they're caught lying, their next answer, 10 seconds shorter. And after that, even shorter. And I love that idea. And of course, debates have modest value because they're so focused on zingers and sort of, create the soundbite for tomorrow's newscast. And they never answer the question often, or they often don't answer the question. But yeah, I'd love to see my students' idea tried.
Yeah, it's a pretty smart idea. You write in the book about what you call the lying Hall of Fame. Besides Trump, who I assume has his own special wing, tell us a few of the people and entities that are also in there.
You bet. So my goal with this was to tell the modern history of political lying, but to do it in a lively way. And so I imagined something sort of like the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame or the Baseball Hall of Fame, where you might come in and see exhibits and whatever. So who and what would be in there? So who, presidents, I got pretty strong consensus on that. Bill Clinton, Lyndon Johnson, Richard Nixon. The presidents, when I talked to political scientists and some journalist colleagues, there was consensus about them. And I didn't go too far back. I think Johnson was as far back as I wanted to go. Then for people in the media who have affected lying, I chose Roger Ailes and Rupert Murdoch because they have created so much in the Fox News channel that has been such a great platform for lying. And Murdoch in particular for his global efforts. And then I selected the couch on Fox and Friends, because if you ever watch that show, it's just a work of art. To watch the friends sit there every morning and dispense these things, sometimes as questions, sometimes just innuendo, but it's just such a great launching pad for lies. So I also thought it would be a great exhibit at my Hall of Fame. You should come in and maybe you could even sit on the couch. Then I also wanted to make sure to recognize other entities that played big roles in political lying. So I included Exxon for its tremendous work denying climate change, and Big Tobacco for its work denying the hazards of smoking. So anyway, I really enjoyed putting those together. Gave me a chance to learn some new things about history and all these different figures. And I think that chapter provides some good perspective that then when you look at some of the things later in the book, it's helpful. One other one that's in there is Facebook. And Facebook has an interesting record here. On one hand, Facebook does good work with fact checkers. The third-party fact-checking project really does help suppress misinformation. But Facebook has done some terrible things in allowing misinformation to spread in some countries. And then I cited in one chapter where I look at one guy who invaded the Capitol on January 6th, and the common denominator for him and many other people who followed Trump's direction to go down to the Capitol was Facebook. Facebook brought all those people together, or a lot of them.
So also in the book's title, you warn of a democracy that could be burned down. How do you think this 240-year-old experiment we call democracy could actually end?
Well, I think the big increase in lying is really worrisome. And we really can see a moment in the not too distant future that if Donald Trump and his party denies a victory for Kamala Harris after the November election, when she does in fact win, that really could be a turning point. And again, that would be just based on lies and lies and lies. I said to somebody yesterday, we could actually write Donald Trump's speech that he will give at 2 a.m. on November 6th.
Mm-hmm.
We could write that speech today.
Sure, I could totally
and,
write it.
And it's actually sort of amusing that I might give my students that assignment. Write his speech, and the student who comes closest gets even more extra credit
I love that
points.
idea.
Because you can predict so many of the lines that he'll use, and there will be lies. And that's so sad, and that's so worrisome. And it's just all about lying.
We know that the dam held in 2020. Do you think it's going to hold this time, given what you just said, knowing that he is literally operating from the same playbook he did back then? He's setting the stage exactly the same way. If I win, it's fair. If I lose, it's rigged. And that brings us to your point in the book, that much closer to not necessarily the end of democracy, but certainly the continued burning down of our democracy by Trump and his ilk.
What's worrisome is that in some of these states, the people who run elections are now Trump loyalists. And I quote Jocelyn Benson in the book. Jocelyn is the Secretary of State of Michigan. And she is concerned that so many of her fellow secretaries of state have expressed support for his election lies. And that's really troubling. And so I think to the extent that you go state by state and see where that's the case, and to the extent that those states might have close elections, it's really scary.
So are we really staring down the barrel of a constitutional crisis in the next couple of months?
I'm not sure I'd go that far, but it's going to take some courage for people, if Trump doesn't win, to be able to stand up to these inevitable lies.
Bill, fascinating conversation. Thanks for coming in. Again, folks, the book is Beyond the Big Lie, The Epidemic of Political Lying, Why Republicans Do It More, and How It Could Burn Down Our Democracy. Good luck with that.
Thank you so much, Andy.
Good luck for all of us on November 5th.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Take care. This episode of The Back Room was edited and produced by me, Andy Ostroy. It was co-edited and co-produced by Matty Rosenberg and co-produced by Jen Hammoud. Our theme song was composed by Andrew Hollander, and our logo was designed by Cricket Lengyel. And special thanks to Patricia Wind. Please take a moment to rate and review the podcast, and also follow or subscribe. Until next time, keep your eyes on Washington, Hollywood, and your own backyards, and have a great week.